Securing your data privacy is more important than ever. Start your free privacy scan and see how much of your data is being sold on the internet. Offering data breach monitoring, bulk data removal, and agency protection, DataSeal.io is the best and most affordable way to secure your data from ending up in the wrong hands. Remove your data today from the internet with DataSeal.io. That's DataSeal.io. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, let us go into the breach on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online. Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Frontline with Joe and Joe, Joe Pasillo and Joe Resinello. We're going to go way into the breach tonight on the Crusade channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Joe Resinello, you got to remember, you know, we have little fascists. We have little fascists, Joe Resinello, that are listening to us, okay? And I'm being serious because that's what they are. And what they do is they declare something to be misinformation, Joe. So I'm sure they'll call that misinformation. So basically what misinformation is anything that they don't like, they're going to label misinformation. It doesn't matter what topic you're talking about. Doesn't matter if you're talking about, I don't know, COVID, if you're talking about anything involving COVID, if you talk about voting and anything involving voting, you got a little 18-year-old fascist at YouTube. And we know this because we're seeing the fallout from Twitter, okay? What do you think they were doing at Twitter? Okay, you have the higher ups, you have the big bullies, and they enlist the help of the little bullies, and they tell them, you sit down in front of a computer and we're going to pay you a few $1,000s a year, and you listen for misinformation. So that, because that's what we're going to call it. So if anybody brings up any of these topics, you let us know. Hit the little bat phone, right? Give us a call, and we'll make sure they get flagged because they're spreading what they call misinformation. And all that is, Joe Resinello, is everything that they don't like, that they don't want us to talk about on YouTube, okay? And you want to know what? It's disgusting. It's disgusting because nobody gets right in the, like all these supposed conservatives, Joe Resinello, they drag these people in front of, they drag them in front of the Congress. Ted Cruz gets up there and says, you know, we put Mark Zuckerberg there. We put him there and we grilled him. And then we had Dorsey there and we grilled him. You didn't do a damn thing about any of this. You didn't do anything to break their monopoly. You're not even threatening anything involving antitrust legislation, okay, or antitrust action against these companies. So guys like us who I think have something to say, okay, I think we have something to say, and our audience, even through it all, even through all the censorship, has borne that out in the growth of our audience, okay? They're so fearful that people communicate with one another. Who spreads the disinformation, Joe Resinello? Who spreads it? The mainstream media, that's who spreads it. The lies that they tell, and then a year and a half later when they caught, they say, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And that's what we're dealing with, Joe. So I just wanted to let you know, Joe, so we have to watch our butts, and we have to watch what we say, okay? Because unfortunately right now we don't have a complete secure line of communication. Other social media networks are trying to build up, Rumble, Truth Social, Donald Trump's. Okay, and we'll see what happens with that. I mean, Joe, Donald Trump, that might set the brains off in the little fascist that's watching our program right now. Okay, because they don't know how to process that people actually would still vote for him because they're not well-formed people. So I hope that little 18-year-old fascist is watching me call the fascists what they are, fascists, because we use the word appropriately, not like them. Everybody's a fascist to them. Okay, but that's all they do. Is wait for you to slip up, wait for you to say something. Joe Resinello, it's disgusting that we have to avoid, in a free society, we have to avoid certain topics or else we get taken down. It's disgusting, Joe Resinello. And these so-called conservatives is who I blame because they had ample opportunity to do something about it, and they didn't do it, Joe.
Well, obviously, you control the people through the press. I mean, that's why you see totalitarian states control the press. It's the same thing here. But the people who run the press are elites, and their interests are served through the politics. So therefore, they control the press to control the people for those who are going to serve their interests. Sadly, the people who run everything in America, everything, banking, advertising, publishing, Hollywood, professional sports, their politics lean left. They're the people who give money to Ted Cruz, to you name it, all of them. And that's why they do nothing. I could remember when Jamie Dimon got called to sit in front of Congress and he had a smirk on his face and people commented on it. And they say, look at this smug guy. The reason why he's smug is this: you're wasting my time. And this is nothing more than a show. You know it, and so do I, because I give you money. So you're going to make me sell a train or take a shuttle down to DC and waste my time for 3 days and pretend like you give a crap. I'm going to give you ridiculous answers, all of which you know are lies. And then we're all going to go our way. And that's why he has a smirk on his face. And that is the same thing why they do nothing, because they get paid from these people.
Right.
And that's it. And I'll be truthful with you, not enough people see through the fog.
I think you're right. Yeah.
To be honest with you, it's a no-win situation. And to be honest with you too, as the politics gets further and further away from God, which means it will go further and further radically left, the Republicans will move left because they want power. Because it's not about the truth. It's not about the people. It's about the power. Give me your vote and sit down. Give me your vote and sit down. And
I want to try.
vote for you. And they do. It's a
I want
show.
to try. I want to chime in right there, Joe Rossinello. We have a couple clips we want to show people as the conversation. We want to stay on this a minute, okay? Give us your vote and then sit down. Why? Because the true conservative, Joe Rossinello, the true political conservative, would follow certain policy proposals, okay? One of which would be term limits. That would be one, okay? My suggestion, in fairness, senators get 2 6-year terms. Then a member of the House of Representatives gets 6 2-year terms. Okay. 12 years is all you could spend in the House. And then if you want to run for Senate, you can run for Senate or governor or any other office. But in that office, you're only going to have a certain amount of time. And then that's it. Okay. Whatever that time might be. Now, you also have to have conservatives, Joe Rossinello, that you are sending to Washington precisely not to take more power on themselves, towards themselves, and bring that power back to the people, which is, I think, where I interpret you were going. They're not going to do that.
Do you know what's their incentive?
Well, their incentive would be, well, how about this? Their incentive would be they can hold their head up high.
Who cares?
Well,
they don't care.
So you would care.
I want to do that.
But you would care.
They don't care.
No, well, it depends on who you have.
Is dead. All of that means nothing to these men and women. None of it. Zero. I don't even think, I used to think like that, like shame on you. No, doesn't mean anything. What they understand is money. Money. You want to get them, you take their money. You find them. You sue them. That is how you get their attention. And I'll be honest with you, Joe, all of that, I'll be truthful with you, means nothing to these people. They're not driven by that. They don't care. And they don't care about people. They care about themselves.
Well,
and
Joe,
they care
remember
about
something.
Power.
But Joe, remember something though. You know, in our travels, everybody out there at the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, knows that I'm in the hospitality business. Joe, in the last 10 years, to say I've met thousands of people is an understatement. I have met a ton of people. Okay, and every now and again, I know this is anecdotal, but anyway, I run into people and we get maybe they'll bring up, I never bring it up because usually I'm working, and I don't bring it up in work. They bring up politics. Okay. And you're talking about people, Joe Rossinello, that would go and hit the lever for Donald Trump. No question about it. Love Trump. They voted for him twice. They vote for him again. Joe, I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't care how judgmental this sounds. They don't want real change. Most of the people that I run into, they vote for Trump. They vote Republican. But as far as the source of our problems, which is our cultural and spiritual rot that lead to our rot in our politics and the corruption in our politics and in our media, okay, is underlying it all are all these social issues that these people. I ran into a guy the other day at work. He's looking at the TV. He's looking at Carrie Lake. Then he says, she's stupid. She's got her head up Trump's, you know what? All right. She supported him. Look what he did. He got us these Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe versus Wade. And 3% of the women in Arizona voted for Katie Hobbs. Now, that was his analysis. Okay. But you see where I'm going with this. I turned around and says, well, who did you vote for? He goes, I voted for her. I voted for Carrie Lake. Do you see what I mean, Joe? This is a Republican. He's mad because somebody actually did something to change something in this country, something substantial like overturning Roe versus Wade through appropriate Supreme Court nominees who became justices. People are the problem, Joe. People
I
are the
agree.
problem. And that means conservative people are the problem,
they're not
Joe.
formed. And what I mean by that is, to be honest with you, even a large swath of Catholics, they're not formed in the truth because, frankly, if you ask me, I don't think they're going to confession regularly. They're not praying. You know, you don't have to be a rocket science to know that abortion is a mortal sin. It's a mortal sin. You can't support that. You simply cannot support that. The bishops have said that too. So did John Paul II very clearly. Let's forget about that. When you're praying, it's like oil in water. When you have an active prayer life, when you're going to confession regularly, when you're receiving the Eucharist, you're in a state of grace. You're communing with God, meaning you're close to God. You're not perfect. You're a sinner, but you're close to God because of the grace through the sacraments. It's like oil and water. Those things don't mix. You don't have to be the smartest person in the world. You don't have to be the best, most well-read person in the world. You simply will not agree or go along because your eyes see, because of the state that you're in. But if you're not doing that, and most people, to be honest with you, half of America who are Catholic vote for people who are pro-aborts, which means that says something to me. Something is off. It's like a priest who, say, abuses a young boy. It's happened, and it's clear. Immediately, if I was basically say the prison psychiatrist talking to that person and I was Catholic, my first question to that priest, when's the last time you went to confession? When's the last time? Do you pray? Do you pray the rosary every day? Guarantee they don't. Something broke. When we're not close to God, something breaks. Our society is broken because of that. And that's why those people you meet don't care about that. Most people don't even go to church. They don't go to church.
Well, Joe, most
And
people,
that's the minimum.
Listen, a lot of this is, looking at politics solely through the lens of politics. They say, well, I don't have to consider those. Listen, Joe Rossinello, I could hear them saying this now, Joe. I wouldn't, of course, take this tone with you. However, listen, Joe Rossinello, I know my conservative politics. I don't have to go to God. I don't have to go to church. No, and again, this is a lot of libertarians. They don't. A lot of atheists find right-wing atheists find a home with libertarians and somewhat agree with us on some conservative issues. But I could hear them saying that, and they say, "But that's why you're blind, because ultimately what you're doing is you want to document, Joe." No, so here's a question for all the Constitution waving conservatives out there, okay? Because I consider us, Mike Church, Rick Barrett, all the people at the Crusade Channel. I consider all the people in the conservative Catholic world out there, particularly in America. Okay, I consider us to be the most politically astute people in this country. I've heard real analysis coming from out there. I don't care if everybody from Tim Gordon to Mike Church, Jesse Romero, all sorts of people. Okay, Michael Vors, all sorts of people. All right. Their political analysis is spot on. You want to know why? Because they don't wave the Constitution like it's the Messiah, like it's some sort of magic piece of paper that all of a sudden is just you're just gonna lay it on a person's head. It's like anointing them, Joe, with the Constitution. Now go and be a good American. It doesn't work that way. They knew this at the founding. You don't waive the Constitution and that solves our problems. You know what the left does to the Constitution, Joe? They spit at it. They don't care for it. While at the same time, Adam Schiff gets up there and he says that, I support the Constitution. I'm faithful to my oath. He's a scumbag liar. I'm sorry, Joe. I know you don't like when I do that. I really apologize. But that's what he's a liar. And anybody who puts their hand on the Bible, who swears allegiance to the Constitution, swears an oath to uphold the Constitution, Joe, they're liars because they don't care about it. And conservatives seem to think that you don't have to talk about the cultural rot, the spiritual rot in this country. The only way that the Constitution has any value is if you have people that understand the idea of order and restraint. Okay, that liberty means that you just don't get to do whatever you want, and freedom means you don't just get to do whatever you want. The Constitution is not some magical document. You have to work on people. And right now, at this moment in history, in this country, Joe, American people are lost. Republican or Democrat.
For quite some time, but ultimately, I'll take it back to John Adams. He basically said that the democracy doesn't work, meaning when the people vote, if they're not moral or have a religious tie. And he wasn't the only one, by the way. They all made comments along those lines. For those, historical buffs out there, as Mike Church would say, the correctersons who want to go and check out what I'm saying. But they did. And you see, ultimately, man is broken. And this is why you could use, say, a conservative or a libertarian that's not grounded in God. When your life is anchored in, say, secular humanism, even in the goodwill, you ultimately will veer. You see that with a lot of Americans, and I'll use Ted Cruz. I'm not picking on him. Ted Cruz left the Catholic Church.
Right.
Sean Hannity left the Catholic Church. They left because it wasn't, for whatever reason, I'm not going to get into their mind or heart, but they left. They're not anchored in truth, completely in truth. Because Jesus said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. He didn't say I'm the custom. He said, I'm the truth. And his church is connected. You can't take the body away from the head. When you're not grounded, once again, in prayer, in a sacramental life, you will veer. You will veer because you're human. It has nothing to do with you personally. It has everything to do with our broken nature. And that is exactly where the American people are.
Well, Joe, but here's the thing. Now, a lot of these people, okay, and again, we always make it clear. Nobody here walks on water. Okay, that's not the case. But a lot of these people, Joe, when they veer, they think, well, I have the freedom to do that, and what I do doesn't affect society. Well, actually, it does. Actually, it does. Okay, you might not think it does, but when Pope Paul VI wrote Humani Vitae, that document is prophetic. That document tells you what the result of this is going to be. Talking in this case about, of course, contraception. And the Catholic Church, no matter how many priests and bishops out there who would love to see the teaching change, the Catholic Church has not changed its position on contraception, nor will it ever change its position on contraception, no matter how many bishops and priests come out and they say that they support contraception. Okay. But yeah, so, and they think in their minds that, and that's why I brought up Humani Vitae, that their private actions don't have consequences for the larger society. Okay, but when your private actions that you thought were just harmless led to your divorce, and now your kids
choose not to look at it that way. That's
they can choose to. Listen, there's a lot of people, Joe. There's a lot of people who try to sneak up on the mirror, and they think that they're going to outfox their own reflection. But when you sneak up on the mirror, your eyes, you're coming right back at you.
No, I know that, but that's not how people operate. I agree with you, Joe. Listen, I agree with you. But that's not how people operate. They live in rationalizations.
But Joe, they're gonna be the ones that listen. You mentioned, I'm gonna hand it over to you. We gotta get to a couple of these other stories. You mentioned a couple of weeks ago. No, I actually forgot where it was. But the bottom line is this: you reap what you sow. Oh, here's the thing: when you're clear on these things, nothing. You mentioned the chastisement. I believe it. Okay, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if it happens, I'm not going to. I'm not going to sit here and be shocked about it. I'm not. Okay, and part of me expects it. But here's the thing: we'll know how to deal with that chastisement, or at least we'll pray that we're guided in the right path, and I believe we will. But one thing we won't be is caught off guard because we're already saying it's coming. These people are going to be so far gone, Joe, they won't even know what hit them. And the thing is, I would tell them, you planted the seeds of this because you paid lip service to your so-called conservative worldview and everything else, but you never did anything about it. You're basically doing everything that the left tells you to do, but you put a little R in front of your name as far as political affiliation, and you put a little C in front of your name as far as your political ideology. Doesn't work that way, Joe. And let me tell you something: these people are going to get a real kick in the you know what when
Well, Joe,
when the time
didn't they
comes.
look at what happened in COVID? Joe, did that rocked people? I mean, rocked them mentally. Tons of people. If you're not grounded in truth, anything that shakes your reality, I'm talking really shakes your reality, like death, like I'm talking serious business. Dude, you're not mentally prepared for it. You see, if you're grounded in God, your world, you'll still feel it. Your world will be rocked, but ultimately you're not living for this world. This isn't, we're renting. Like a person who's truly grounded in the Lord is not building their castle here. Most of America is. And when that castle's foundation gets shook, they get shook to the point where they can't cope. You see, dude, God is reality. The world doesn't think it is, but it is. And the proof is in the pudding because people who live lives grounded in God, most of them, to be honest with you, function very well. They may not be on the cover of People magazine. They pay their bills. They have peaceful homes. They're joyful. They sleep well. They're not over medicated. They don't take sleeping pills. They don't abuse drugs.
Joe, I gotta ask you this, Joe. All right, because we've been on this topic, but if it seems like we both have thoughts coming into our head here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. Joe, most of the people that don't see this stuff coming are self-identified Christians. They'll quote you the Bible, Joe. You just mentioned the foundation. How firm is my foundation? Because my foundation is Jesus Christ. Okay, great. You can quote scripture. Are you doing anything to lay a foundation? And
Well,
what do we
I would
mean by
say
it?
to that
And really, Joe,
person,
real
what do you
quick, Joe,
do
and
with
I'm going
your
to hand it.
sin?
No,
You
but real
see,
quick, I'm going to hand
that's
it
the
over to you.
problem.
But here's the thing: people would say, "Well, then what is that foundation?" And I would put it very simply: this is look at those things you say you believe in, and see if you could square that, even if you just wanted to go sola scriptura. Okay, um, just see if you could square that with scripture. All those things, and ask yourself, are you really building a firm foundation? Are you? Or are you buying and have you bought in America in the name of Americanism, by the way, Joe Rostinello? In the name of Americanism, not in the name of God, not in the name of Jesus Christ, in the name of Americanism, these people don't realize they're the ones building the foundation, and they will swear to you that it's a strong foundation. In the meantime, it's made of sand, Joe. And the
Well,
reason
the
why I
proof
bring it
is
up
in the
is these
pudding.
are Christians.
I get it. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. Like, I can't speak for Protestants that were born into their faith and say they live in rural Arkansas where really they have no exposure to the Catholic faith. You know, there are parts of the world, of even in America, where you have to probably drive a considerable distance. But people who leave the church and go into they become Episcopalian or they become whatever. A lot of it comes down to they don't want to go to confession. They don't want to say what I did was wrong. I cheated on my wife. I left my wife. And I'm wrong. Like, people live in rationalization.
Or
So they just,
divorced.
But my point is, the problem is there, Joe, that's so many people. That's so many people. And frankly, again, the proof is in the pudding. The way to change the culture is what we've talked to many people on our interview show. You have to set the example. People have to see it. The deacon today said it. He's spot on. You have to think local, something Mike Church has said for quite some time. I agree with him 100%. You have to form what I call little islands of goodness, Catholic communities, little things to basically give witness to your faith, to your children. And also, to be honest with you, people see you. People see you in your neighborhood. They see that your life works. Your life works. And to be honest with you, many people, their life simply doesn't. And
Well,
they
they'll
know
switch.
it when they go to bed. They could talk a good game. When they wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and they're staring at their ceiling and their life is spiraling out of control. Your witness, and the deacon said this today, is the witness of Christ and his church, a sacramental life. Your life works. It's not perfect because you're not perfect. That's how we change America.
Well, we
People,
change America by embracing those things which are true and rejecting those things which are lies. And the thing is, in the culture, Joe, let me tell you something, Joe. How many times have we have to do we have to say it on this show as an example of what we're talking about? Ted Cruz says, "Well, I'm going to reach across the aisle, the AOC, so we can make contraception more available." Ted, wrong. You're the problem now, Ted. I don't care if you're right on the Constitution. I don't care if you're right on your political position. You're wrong. And that position alone, Joe Rossinello, in my view, that negates any good that Ted Cruz does, because that tells me no matter how smart he is, no matter how much time he spent in the Ivy League, he ain't that smart, because he doesn't realize it's that view and the views on many of these other issues that are leading to our political rot. And he doesn't equate the two. Why? Because as Jesus said, he does not have eyes to see. He does not see how something like contraception, use that as an example. Go ahead, Joe.
well, let's think about a person who's listening to us right now who's a secular person or even a self-professed Catholic who contracepts. They'd say that's crazy. Let's break it down. Why is the church against contraception? Because it's open to life, because that is the true meaning of marriage. But what does contraception say to your spouse? It says, I love you to a point. I'm using you for pleasure and you're using me. I only love you to this point. I don't give myself completely to you and you don't give myself completely to me. Now, some people might say, but I'm fine with that. That will bleed into other aspects of your marriage. Love is selfless. It's not selfish. And selfless love dies. And that is why, because to love that way, Joe, is self-sacrificing. And people will not do it because it requires you to die to yourself. You're not going to own the car you want. You're not going to own the house you want. You're not going to have the vacations that you want. You are going to die to yourself. And what the world says to that, get out of my face. Especially Americans. I don't love that much, and I won't, because I like my stuff.
Well, when the boot
And
comes
then
down
there
on
are
their face,
consequences. There are consequences. I'll live with it. Fine. Fine.
no, they won't. Joe,
No,
they could talk it real quick. They could
they
talk a
live
good game
poorly.
now.
They live
When
poorly. But this is, Joe, the proof's in the pudding.
Joe,
5
it's
out
like,
of 10 people get divorced. The proof is in the pudding. And
and
this
by
is
the way,
what,
as another,
and people are fine with it.
yeah.
Many people know what the truth is. What I just said, to be honest with you, isn't a deep theological concept. I think it's very clear to see. Selfless love dies. Contraception is selfish. I'm
Right.
using you, you're using me. That is a marriage killer.
Right.
And it bleeds into other aspects of your marriage.
Well, that's
Selfish.
why American Christianity, most American Christianity has no problem with divorce. has no
Of
problem with
course not.
contraception.
Of
They
course
don't
not.
have
That's
any problem.
another nail
I
in
got to
our
hear it, Joe. I
society.
got to
That's
hear it from
another
people I
nail.
know.
But people
No,
are not willing to go that way, Joe,
well,
because again, it's costly. To follow Jesus Christ is costly. You see, you're not going to do that on the superficial level. And most Americans, including most Catholics, are perfectly fine by having a superficial existence, even many that go to church. But you know something? That means you will not know joy in the way you can. That means you will not be fully alive in the way you can be. God came to give us life and give it abundantly. He didn't give us a life that we're going to be basically like, oh, this stinks. I'll be honest with you. I believe in everything the church says. Do I do it perfectly? No, because I'm not perfect, but I prescribe to all the things that Catholic marriage, and I have a good marriage, a solid marriage. And to be honest with you, everyone says they want to have a solid marriage. That requires you to do certain things, just like everyone wants a good life. You're not going to magically have a good life. You have to do certain things. People aren't willing to do them, but then you reap what you sow. And that is where we are in America. We're reaping what we sow. And it's
well,
not going to magically get better. And it's not going to be politically fixed because people don't want to hear it.
I think you're
Joe,
right. What you said
I've been
earlier.
talking for 30 years to people. I've done Bible studies for almost 2 decades. People don't want to hear the answer. They crucified Jesus Christ. He was God. He had miracles accredited to him. They killed him. They let a criminal escape punishment before they crucified him. Do you think people are going to listen to me? But what they can do is see my example. What I can do is continue to live a sacramental life, live a good example, and maybe I'll touch a few. And if everyone did that, America would improve.
Well,
But if we
let's
don't,
get it.
it's not going to.
Well, let's get it straight. Joe Rossinello here at the Frontline with Joe and Joe on the Crusade Channel, always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com. So we have a clip from Project Veritas. We want to play it for you. I'm not going to say anything. We're going to play the clip, and then here's the consequence of what Joe Rossinello and I were just talking about. It, Jonathan, please.
Like our LGBTQ plus health center come in, they were passing around butt plugs and dildos to my students, talking about queer sex, using lube versus using spit.
Meet Joe Bruno, Dean of Students at the prestigious Francis W. Parker Private School in Chicago, which happens to charge $40,000 per student.
They're just like passing around dildos, butt plugs. The kids are just playing with them. They're like, how does this butt plug work? How do we do, like, how does this work? That's a really cool part of my job.
Parents might be stunned to learn that Bruno's version of love and acceptance means handing out sex toys to underage students.
So I've been the dean for 4 years. During Pride, we do a Pride Week every year, and I had like our LGBTQ plus health center come in. They were passing around butt plugs and dildos to my students, talking about queer sex, using lube versus using spit.
Who is this?
This is an LGBTQ plus health center came in to talk to my high school students. They're just like passing around dildos, butt plugs. The kids are just playing with them. They're looking at them.
In the school?
In a classroom.
Wow.
Yeah. While I'm sitting there. And we had a drag queen.
I part of me wants to laugh.
It's disturbing, dude.
But
I
then
mean,
you
it's
have to say to
freaking
yourself,
disturbing. But
And I blame all those people. Joe, let me tell you something. Let's talk on one level about what part of what we just saw, okay, from Project Veritas is you have to understand there's an agenda here. And what do I mean by that? And I'm going somewhere with this. What father in his right mind who's paying $40,000 a year to that school doesn't want to go to that school and really do some things we wouldn't mention on this show to Mr. Bruno, okay? And I'm talking about agendas because that's precise one of the things that the left wants. Remember something, Merrick Garland is going after parents who yelled at the school board, okay, simply yelled, he's going after them because they're harassing, Senator. They're harassing people, Senator, and our statute has to do with harassment and intimidation. That means that if you want to go yell at Mr. Bruno, let's say you don't do anything crazy, but you go there and you tell him, do that to my kid again. Who are you to do that to my kid? And get in his face and yell at him, Joe, these are the times we live in. Merrick Garland will have you arrested. In the meantime, in more sane times, which means up until about a minute ago on the historical scale, Mr. Bruno would have been arrested. Okay? This guy's disgusting. We hand around dildos and butt plugs. What are you talking about? And who do you blame, Joe? Who do you blame,
dude,
Joe?
I don't know.
I
This
blame
world is
the
so
mother
crazy,
and father
dude.
who's spending $40,000 a year to send their kids to that school. I blame them because guess what, Joe? They're not going to do anything to Mr. Bruno. They're not going to do anything. He'll give out all the butt plugs and dildos he wants. All right. And he'll bring in the drag queen and all of it. Okay. Mr. Bruno's a disgusting person. And any parents of that school who let him get away with that, then you're disgusting parents. And because if somebody did, Joe, if somebody did that to my son, I would never put my hands on anybody. I would never put my hands on. I would go to that school and confront that teacher. I would go to that school and publicly, right in front of everybody, say, who do you think you are? Exposing my children to that stuff. I would make a scene. Then let them arrest me. Let them arrest me. I don't care. I wouldn't hit anybody. All right. Because we're not supposed to do that. But you understand where I'm going? The anger level, looking at this guy. Part of you wants to laugh, like you said. Part of you wants to freaking cry.
Well, it's just sad. It's not even like I mean, to be honest with you, it's just sad. But this is to a degree. That's an exaggeration in a sense. It's not. That's not everywhere. But this is the beginning stages of what's happening in public schools all over America. All over America. They're trying to normalize certain behavior. And to be honest with you, we're paying for it. Taxpayers, all of us are paying for it. It's a sad, sad day. To be truthful with you, it's just another nail in the coffin of America. There's been many of them. And because it's not going to produce, what I would say is this, all of these ideas, well, let's focus on, because we just talked about it today, say transgenderism. Europe has been ahead of us on this issue, and we covered this a long time ago on a show. They're now backing away from transgenderism, particularly in young kids. Europe, France, and I believe it's Denmark. Don't quote me on it, but it's a Scandinavian country, because it hasn't bore good fruit. But we've doubled down and tripled down, and this is what we want to do. None of this is going to bear good fruit, Joe. Just like no-fault divorce didn't bear good fruit. It didn't bear good fruit. You have a bunch of wounded people who basically lost their parents and they're wounded. Tons of them in America. It did not bear good fruit. This will not bear good fruit. And ultimately, again, to change people's minds, I don't know if it can be done. You see, I'll be honest with you. This is where I believe we're in a chastisement. God gets people's attention. God, there's a saying, the millstone of God grinds slow, but it grinds fine. God, just like today is the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. Do you know that before the basic American Indians converted to Catholicism, in the millions, I've heard 7 million, 8 million, 9 million in a 5-year period, smallpox wiped out half their population. They were killing people for a long period of time, human sacrifice. The Spaniards came, smallpox wiped out 1 in 2 people. Then Our Lady shows up and 8 million people, 7 million, 9 million, whatever. Convert. This is how God works sometimes. No one wants to listen. Well, guess what? He will beat the snot out of you. He will allow you. He will basically open the floodgates and allow your enemies to grind you into dirt. And that is what happens in societies. It's happened to the Israelites. It happened to the Romans. It happened to the American Indians in Mexico. And then some will change. We're destroying ourselves right before our eyes, and no one cares to listen. No one. So God will act, and he's acting. We already lost 1 million people because of COVID. 1 million. That's the appetizer. That's the appetizer. Get ready, America. Buckle up, because you don't want to listen. You don't want to change. Well, guess what? This society is crumbling. It's crumbling.
Well, what's your evidence of that? I would say that clip we just played. What on God's green earth is this guy Bruno doing even remotely near kids? Anywhere near kids? And I'm not. Why is it that people think we're exaggerating? All of it. When did the law change? Like a minute ago? That this guy a minute ago would have been arrested, and then nobody would have said a word.
10 years ago, if you did that.
No, you
10.
know, I'm saying like a minute. When I say a minute ago, I'm exaggerating.
No, but I'm
very up
recent.
until very recently. Now this guy's going to be a hero. They'll all rally around him, and James O'Keefe is the bad guy. Project Veritas are the bad guys. Joe and Joe are the bad guys. Mike Church is a bad guy. Rick Barrett's a bad guy. All the people out there in Catholic social media are bad guys and women. We're all the bad guys because I don't want dildos and butt plugs handed out to kids. And somehow, some way, if I say anything, I got to let Joe Bruno or whatever his name is, I got to let Joe Bruno continue to hand those things out and bring the drag queen in, and we're going to do a little reading and everything. Not for nothing. There's something to be said for grabbing somebody by their ear like my mother used to do and dragging them out of the school and saying, get away from kids. Now they are promoting. They'll get right in your face, Joe Resinello, and they will tell you that he's supposed to be near your children because you are not to be trusted with your children. You are not to be trusted with the upbringing of your children.
Parents have to remove alternate school-like processes have to come from this. And I think I told you this on a show a couple weeks ago. I was outside my kid's school and I was listening to two parents and they were talking about like almost forming like a little charter school of their own. Like basically like we'll pay because to be honest with you, and I differ in my view on homeschooling with some. I don't know if some people are actually trained to do it. Because I could just use myself as an example. There were courses that I took in high school that the average parent couldn't teach. Advanced math, the average physics, the average person, even someone who's smart, you're not going to teach that. There's a reason why you have a teacher, meaning, and that's what these parents will pay somebody like to have like the little schoolhouse model. It depends what you want your kid to do. But if your kid, not every kid, has that type of intellect. And, like if you want your kid to really, I don't know, or has that type of mind, the average parent is going to teach them German. They're not going to teach them, AP chemistry. You don't have lab equipment. You don't have a physics lab. You don't know advanced math, but you form a school whereby they can do it and they share your values.
Well, I'll tell you this: the school here in Arizona, the school system here, where my wife teaches and my son is he's a student. Okay, is a charter school, meaning it's a public school. Okay, but here's the thing: Arizona has a situation where they have public schools, and I know some public school teachers because I work with them because that's what they do during the day, and at night they either wait tables or bartend or whatever. Okay, they complain about that we don't put enough money into public education. And I've gotten into these conversations. And in Arizona, if you're in the public school, you do okay. You're not doing as good as New Jersey. You're not doing as well as New York because there you have these all-powerful teachers unions, okay, that put the clamp down and lobby with the politicians to clamp down on charter schools, which are basically public schools. Not so here. The charter schools, which are difficult to get into, and you got to go on a list. That's why we need more of them. Okay. But my son's in one of those schools and what they ask you for is a contribution. They get money from the state. They get a certain amount of money from the state per student. and they ask you for $1,500 per year per student as long as your child's in that school, which to me is nothing. That and I don't have any money. I don't make money. I have not much money at all. Okay. And I'll pay that $1,500, no problem whatsoever. Because the alternative would be a 6,000 here. It's a $6,000 or $8,000 Catholic school. In New Jersey, it's a $15,000 or $18,000 Catholic school. Okay. So my point in telling the story is that the charter schools here in Arizona work because the teachers unions don't have a clampdown on local politics, on the state government. So they coexist with one another. They compete with one another. The teachers don't get paid that great. But then again, historically, Joe, teachers never got paid that great. In other words, it was something that you did mostly out of love. You made some money. You got some decent benefits. All right. And, you're not a slave. You're off in the summertime. You work basically from 9 to 3, 8:30 to 3:30, or whatever the case might be. And it was a pretty good gig. They should do it the way they do here. In other words, but they'll never do it in blue states because the teachers unions have too much power. But my point, Joe, is that the structure, the system of charter schools works. And this one here in particular, Joe, is run very close, if not even exceeding the expectations of Catholic schools in this area.
I think as the example that we just illustrated with Mr. Bruno gets more and more pervasive across America, people will push back. I mean, the left does have the tendency to overplay their hand, and I think they've overplayed their hand when you hear a conversation like that. We've seen that in a number of cases. And to be truthful with you, the union will weaken as a result of it. I think they've gone way too far. Frankly, there's no place for activism in any type of public education, any whatsoever. Just teach your subject. That's it. We live in a pluralistic society. You're not interested in my ideology as a Catholic. Well, I'm not interested in yours, and you're sure as heck have one. But I pay taxes too. So just let's compromise. Just teach your subject. They're not having that. But the further they push, and they're continuing to push, the more people like those little conversations that I just overheard in front of my kid's school. It's a Catholic school, and they were talking about it. The more people have those conversations, because the average person hears that guy and says, "Are you kidding me?" Even a Democrat, a sane human, not some crazy metrosexual lunatic that lives in Chicago, New York, and doesn't have kids, or is living in their own head, or someone in academia who's just crazy. The average person, Republican or Democrat, hears that conversation and just basically says, "Get out of my kid's face." And you're pushing the limit. And frankly, if the more they push, the more cracks in their own bread and butter, their own pensions will start to surface. And that could very easily happen, to be true.
Well, listen, let's hope it happens. I mean, like you always say on the show, Joe, I mean, money moves the dial. The problem is that, look, I look at it this way. If you want a reason to vote, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try as best I could. I'm going to see if I could get into a town hall in the next presidential election, whether it's Ron DeSantis, whether it's Donald Trump, or whoever it is. I'm going to keep my eyes out for any sort of open forum. And the question I'm going to ask them is, when you get into office, if I vote for you, on day one, I want you to abolish the Department of Education. Send all education back to the states. Let California do what they want. Let Arizona do what it wants. No more money for higher education. No more money coming from from one state to give to another. Every state's on their own with education. You abolish the federal Department of Education. That means Harvard and Yale and the rest don't get any money. I'll vote for that guy first, because education is one of the biggest ways that they control things in this country. If you dry up the money, okay? So, and on another note, Joe, I don't understand. Everybody knows that public sector unions are unconstitutional. I don't know why there hasn't been lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit filed against all these teachers' unions. In other words, to have them broken up by the Supreme Court. It is a conflict of interest. You, Joe, that's what you deal with in compliance, okay? Conflict of interest. You know all about that, okay? There is a conflict of interest. You can't get taxpayer money from a politician in return for your vote In other words, and if anybody doesn't see that, it's as plain as the nose on your face. How come the Supreme Court maybe hasn't seen a case, or maybe I'm not aware of it, hasn't taken this and strike this stuff down? Public sectors unions need to be broken up, all of them, every single one of them, not just teachers unions, okay? Because they don't operate privately is fine, but public, you can't do it. And all these measures that people are going to need to have to start to implement if they're going to want my vote. That's my longer story. Anyway, you're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo and Joe Rossinello were way in the breach. I'm angry now, Joe. I'm angry because we're talking about teachers unions, and that tends to get me angry. That and Joe Bruno talking about dildos and butt plugs that he's handing out to 5-year-old children. Here's the thing, Joe. I want to play one more clip. Here's a Republican. All right, here's a Republican. Let's play it, John, and let's come back and talk about why Republicans are useless.
Can't go pinning this there. We do need to regroup. From a mail-in ballot standpoint, in particular, since they're a reality in Pennsylvania and Georgia and early voting, we got to do a far better job. Rob, just in Pennsylvania, this last election, the Democrats had over 1 million. Just about 1 million mail-in ballots for Democrats. Republicans had barely 150,000. So before the election day even begins, we were that far behind. So we've got some real work to do, and I think somebody like Rona is innovative enough to see that.
Okay, first of all, Ronna McDaniel is that he was referring to, the current head of the RNC, is useless. Okay, she's done nothing. She watched all this happen over the course of the last several years. She's done nothing about it. And if she did do anything about it, obviously what she came up with, Joe Rossinello, to do was useless. Okay, this guy here, he's talking about fighting the Democrats with mail-in ballots. Wrong answer. The Supreme Court, my friend, the Supreme Court is where you have to go. You have to file a lawsuit. Carrie Lake is doing it. Carrie Lake has a pretty good case. She says she's going to keep fighting this. She's going to expose it, at least as far as she could, maybe in Arizona. But, Joe, if she goes to the Supreme Court with this and they win on a number of fronts at the Supreme Court, that's going to have a ripple effect through other states. Look at what happened with New York with the conceal and carry law for the guns. That means that in Chicago, you could conceal and carry. That means in California, you could conceal and carry because it's a decision of the Supreme Court. This politician, I don't know his name, he's from Pennsylvania. He's talking about fighting them by using mail-in ballots. Wrong answer, dude. Wrong answer. Trump gave you what you needed to fight these battles. A real, truly conservative Supreme Court. Joe, that's where we need to fight them so that whatever they rule is going to be nationwide. That's where you have to fight them.
Well, I think we asked the wrong questions. My question to anyone who's for mail-in ballots is simply why. We don't live in 1950 in, say, the state of Arkansas where people can't vote. You can vote anywhere in America, anyone, whether you're a Catholic, you're Jewish, you're Muslim, you're Black, you're Asian, you're Hispanic. Anyone can vote. So why do we need mail-in ballots? Ask that question, okay? This is my answer to it. And if I'm wrong, forgive me, God. But this is what I think. I think it's a way to facilitate non-citizens to vote because you're basically mailing out a ballot. You're not requiring the control of an ID or a signature verification, and it allows that person to vote. That is why you saw for the last 2 years, no border. A flood. Do you think that they're allowing these people into this country? And I'm for immigration, by the way. Obviously, there has to be boundaries and vetting and a proper, process. But ask yourself another question. Why did they do this? They see this as a potential voting base. But then you'll say to yourself, well, how is that person going to vote? They don't have a social security number. They don't have any official ID. The mail-in ballot. That is my thought. And now, if I'm wrong, God forgive me, but this is what I am thinking. Ultimately, and then they'll say, well, why can't a person who comes in this country vote? That's racist. You're a racist. No, I'm not. They don't pay taxes. If you don't pay taxes, you can't vote. It comes right down to that.
If you're not a citizen,
But I'll
you
even
can't
just break it
vote.
down in pure money. Pure money. You don't pay taxes, you cannot vote. And it's a way to facilitate them to vote. Now, that gentleman is playing into their hands. He's playing into their hands. Ultimately, there has to be controls around voting. That's not anti anyone. That just makes the system work. You have to have controls, paper ballots, ID, signature verification, and a state trooper in every location to make sure there's order. That doesn't make me a racist. That makes me sane.
Well, you're
And if
dealing.
you have a problem with that, I have another question for another step. Why? If you're so confident that you can get the votes and you could beat the American people, why do you have a problem with I just put forth? I have a problem with what you just put forth because I believe non-citizens can vote. And that is not fair because they don't pay taxes. That does not make me a hater. That makes me, if you ask me, very linear and logical. And that is where we don't ask the right questions. Now, you talk about the Supreme Court, Joe. Will they even take the case?
I think they're going to have to. I think they're going to have
The Supreme Court just recently in October of 2022 did not take a case that basically said that personhood is basically a requirement of abortion. Basically, the child in the womb, qualifying them as a person. That's a dangerous case. It's one thing to throw Roe v. Wade back to the states. It's another thing to say that a child that's 7 months in the womb, which is viable, that if it comes out of the womb, it could live, is a person. Oh, you're dangerous. What you just said is dangerous. And will we do it? I don't trust John Roberts in doing that. Why is it that we still don't know who put the leak out on Roe v. Wade? We could find Saddam Hussein in a hole in the middle of Iraq. And there were probably about a pool of 50 people who knew. And we still don't know it because they don't want you to know it, because that was intentional to intimidate the justices. And this is the corruption that exists in America. It's staring you all in the face and no one gives a flying crap, but you're going to care when the society collapses and your little comfortable world collapses and you're on your ass.
Yeah.
Because it's coming. Get ready and buckle up.
Yeah, buckle up is right. I think T.S. Eliot, the line in The Wasteland is crumbling cities, Jerusalem, Athens, Vienna, Rome. In other words, unreal. Unreal. If Eliot was writing that poem now, he'd have to include Washington, D.C., New York. In other words, crumbling cities all around us, a crumbling culture, a crumbling society. None of this is a shock to us, Joe Rossinello. None of this is a shock to Mike Church. None of this is a shock to all the team at the Crusade Channel. Always on air and always online at crusadechannel.com, the last live radio station standing. Thank you all. Thanks, Mike Church, for always giving Joe and I a platform. You always have been and continue to be very gracious to us. Thank you all out there for joining us and joining us in the chat room and for your comments. We love you all. Remember, if you do see Joe and I on social media, wherever it is, like, subscribe, share, primarily at the Frontline with Joe and Joe, the Frontline with Joe and Joe on YouTube. And we just started a Twitter account at with Joe and Joe. So at that little sign with Joe and Joe on Twitter, you can follow us there. And remember, until the next time, that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere. We'll talk to you soon.